Welcome to the Let's Talk About Love, Sex, and Infidelity podcast with your host, Todd Krieger. Todd has over 35 years of experience working with thousands of couples as a licensed therapist in his private practice. Todd shares his insights on this show. It's never too early to divorce-proof your marriage or too late to heal yourselves and have the relationship you truly want.
Hi, everybody. Todd Krieger. Today, I'm going to talk to you about infidelity, but I did a video, actually, it was titled How Cheating Cheats the Cheater, and it got a lot of interest. So I did want to come back to that and talk about it through a different lens as I continue to evolve as a therapist, as the person who helps individuals and couples heal from this crisis of infidelity. And so it's a little different than the past one, but it's still all about how cheating cheats the cheater. Okay, so I'm going to use the lens of internal family systems, IFS they call it. And in internal family systems, it's a brilliant and accurate, I believe, approach to us and our psyche. And we have a part of us, this healthy part of us that actually is innate. It's called the self in IFS terminology. You could call it your higher self, your best self. Some people might call it your divine self. But whatever you call it, it's this part of you that, and we can use the 8 C's. I don't never remember all 8, but it's a part of us that are naturally, we have this capacity to be compassionate, to be calm, to be clear and connected and confident, and a few other C words, but you get the idea. Curious, very important, actually. So when we talk about we are doing self-leadership, it means that we're leading our lives from that self. Unfortunately, though, or just the way it is, we get wounded in life. There's things happen as a kid and through our entire lives where we might get wounded, and we end up having these protective parts that protect us from those wounds. So those wounds, we call it exile parts, because we literally exile them to a part of our psyche, because we can't really function well if this exiled part of us runs the show, because we don't really, it's overwhelming. That's why we exiled it in the first place. So we have these protective parts, or protector parts, and one is the manager and one is the firefighter. The manager keeps the wounded part at bay, and the firefighter distracts us when that wounded part starts to come up. So what I am saying is the reason people do cheat is usually because some protective part is acting out. Oftentimes a firefighter part that's distracting you from whatever it is you're feeling, your boredom, your emptiness, your depression, your anxiety, whatever it is, and there's an escape into it. But what I really want to focus on is how the cheater cheats himself out, or cheats himself out of this internal leadership, this self. Because when we are in self-leadership, we are in the driver's seat. We are the ones connected to ourselves, connecting to other people, being very clear, being compassionate. And when we're living from that, our lives are great. Our lives are joyful. When you cheat, you're basically handing the keys to the car to a manager or a firefighter. The firefighter is always the seeker, seeking out ways to escape from whatever that wound that is starting to emerge. For example, I've had people who cheat, and I track it down, and maybe they came from a family where they were all alone. Nobody was there for their pain. And then they get married and they're humming along, and then they lose their job. They get fired. They have below their self-esteem. And that's when they start to cheat. Now, that's just one example. But typically what we're talking about there is they felt bad about themselves, and their way of temporarily feeling good is to have another person who seems to be attracted to them, and they fall for that. Okay, so you have basically handed the keys to the car that you're driving over to the firefighter who cheats, the seeker, the distractor. And then you they have to cover things up. And you have to lie. That's the manager. You're managing. You don't want to be found out. You don't want to be seen for the quote-unquote bad person you are. I'm not saying you are, but that's how it feels to the person who cheats. And usually. And so they now are lying, and you are basically having your car driven by a part of you. It's a part that is either desperate and impulsive or just clamoring to keep things together, to keep reputation together, to keep the family together. You lose your clarity and you lose your calm. Two of the C words. So that becomes a problem. If you are someone who betrayed, I do want you to see that you're not living from self. You're living from protective parts. They're running the show, and it really ultimately never is going to make your life better. And the good news is that we can always be interested, be curious about those parts, try to understand them, try to understand what they did for you, even though they are hurtful to you and hurtful to a partner and hurtful to a family, so that we can now unburden those parts that did those things, so that you have other choices, so that you learn how to handle yourself where you're not being run by protecting yourself from wounds. And once you ultimately maybe get some therapy, like from someone such as me, that helps you heal those wounds, there's no need for those protective parts, the manager and the firefighter, to protect that wound and at the same time do havoc on your life. So hopefully this makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me questions about this. But this is, after doing this for decades, I am so convinced that this is the way to look at infidelity and other issues in life that is more accurate than any other way that I see. It's easy to brand the cheater as a bad person, whether you're the person who betrayed and you're branding yourself that way, or you're the victim of betrayal and you're hurt and you're in pain and you can brand the person that way. And almost all the time, that's not really the case. So you want to get back into leadership and stop cheating yourself out of that life. And for people that have betrayed that I've worked with, oftentimes, the relationship can heal. But even if the relationship doesn't heal, even if the person who got betrayed is saying, no more, I can't deal with this, I am not willing to, and they have that right. They absolutely have that right. That by doing this work, you still will have a healthier life because you're running by yourself, capital S, rather than those protective parts. Try to run from wounds that can be healed. I have had my job cut out for me sometimes when I'm working with a betrayed person. When I'm working with a person who betrayed, the person who cheated, when their partner is giving up on the relationship and moving on. Suddenly the person who betrayed thinks, okay, why bother doing the therapy? Don't think that, because you have cheated yourself and you could continually cheat yourself in the future unless you get a handle on this and you get this awareness and you heal. Those parts get healed, they get unburdened, the wounds get healed, and now you're back in the driver's seat. Yourself is back in the driver's seat, making better choices for you. So whether your relationship continues and hopefully thrives or it ends, you still have a life to live. So I wanted to say that. I also have, click on the link to Infidelity First Aid Kit. Really a wonderful way to begin to stop the bleeding and to begin the healing. So thanks for listening. This is Todd Krieger, making the world safe.
That's it for today's episode of Let's Talk About Love, Sex, and Infidelity podcast with your host, Todd Krieger. For free resources and materials, head over to toddkrieger.com. Loved this episode? Head over to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and leave a review. We'd really appreciate it. Thank you.